Attack on America.
Terrorists take aim at the heart of America, destroying buildings, taking lives, and changing our way of life. Good evening. Thanks very much for joining us tonight. This morning, the United States was the victim of apparent terrorist attacks in Washington and New York.
Two separate airliners crashed into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in Manhattan. Both buildings eventually collapsed. About an hour later, a third commercial airliner crashed into the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. No one has yet to claim responsibility for the attacks. Senior FBI sources say they're operating on the premise that all four commercial jets that crashed today were all hijacked.
A Boeing 767 American Airlines Flight 11 was flying from Boston to Los Angeles when it changed course and crashed into the World Trade Center's North Tower. 92 people were on board. United Airlines Flight 175 from Boston to Los Angeles later crashed into the World Trade Center's South Tower. 65 people were on board that flight. A third plane, a Boeing 757 American Airlines Flight 77, was flying from Dulles Airport outside Washington to L.A. before it crashed into the Pentagon. 64 people were on board. A fourth plane, United Airlines Flight 93, headed from Newark, New Jersey to San Francisco, also crashed today. It went down near Somerset, Pennsylvania. 45 people were on board.
New York Mayor Rudolph Giuliani says the number of casualties from the attack that destroyed the World Trade Center, quote, will be more than most of us can bear. There were some 50,000 people who worked in the two 110-story buildings. For the first time in U.S. history, the Federal Aviation Administration halted all air traffic around the nation. That, of course, in response to the terrorist attacks today. The FAA says it will not lift the ban until noon tomorrow at the earliest.
Q2's Joe Gale is standing by live tonight at Billings Logan International with the latest. Joe.
At this hour, flags are also at half-mast at Billings Logan International Airport. Today, some 300 operations canceled in wake of this morning's events. Lots of general aviation affected by that. As a result, UPS carriers, FedEx, all will be on the ground overnight here at Billings Logan International Airport. And again, this is just a general aviation aircraft. Walk over here, you can see our commercial airline carriers will also be here overnight. That includes Northwest, United, Delta, Big Sky Airlines, all the jets staying here overnight. And again, at the earliest, they take off from here tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock Montana time. Now, early this morning, we caught up with some passengers just as they were learning that their flights were canceled.
We're going to Denver today, and just as we're loading, they made the announcement that we had to unload and come get our luggage, and they just announced that there was some incidents at the World Trade Center.
It's a concern, you know, obviously any kind of activity on a national level that shuts down every airport in the United States is a concern.
I keep making calls to people and they tell me all the different things that are happening, and it's unbelievable. I mean, I'm scared to go on. I really am. I think I'm going to cancel my flight to D.C. even though I'm supposed to be there for a 3-day conference.
And joining me now live is Director of Aviation here at Billings Logan International Airport, Mr. Bruce Putnam. Bruce, I guess tell us at this hour, when is the last time you heard from the FAA, and are they giving you any idea when flights will resume from Billings?
Joe, let me take that question second, actually, and just say, again, we are greatly sorrowed by today's tragic events, and that our thoughts and prayers certainly go out to the people directly involved in today's tragic events and the families of those folks. Then to your question, we have been actively engaged speaking with the FAA for some while, as you might well imagine, and we know, I guess new news this afternoon is that we know the FAA has indicated that it will be at a minimum tomorrow noon before they give consideration to opening up the nation's air traffic control system, which has been closed since shortly after the event in New York City this morning.
Tell me, what lengths has the airport gone to locally here to heighten security measures?
Well, if your camera panned around, and I know it can't, you'd see some police officers standing south of us here at this point on the west end of the building. The FAA has required of all airports in America for a long while security plans to deal with events like this, although it would be hard to say anyone ever anticipated an event quite like this. All of those things require special security treatments, and we're enhancing those as we speak at the direction of the FAA.
And as you know, as a result of today's actions, there's lots of demands on rental cars. People are wondering about ticket refunds or cancellations. What advice do you give to the Billings Air passenger tonight?
Well, again, without being flip here, the answer to that really is it's the same sort of circumstance that exists in a high traffic time of the year like Christmas. And the people need to really stay in touch with the airline that they're ticketed on or the travel agent they bought that ticket from to talk about issues centering on getting rescheduled for flights out of here when and if the FAA opens up the nation's air traffic control system again.
Bruce, thanks for your time today. We'll be in touch throughout tonight and, of course, throughout the next coming days.
Thank you, John.
Again, we're live at Billings Logan International Airport, where all flights are grounded, both commercial aviation and general aviation, until further notice. Julie, Jay?
Q2's Joe Gale reporting live tonight. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe. Today's security measures at Billings Logan International Airport also granted at least one St. Vincent healthcare flight temporarily. This morning, the pilot of the hospital's fixed-wing plane had to abort a flight and return to the airport shortly after takeoff. Community Relations spokeswoman Tracy Neary says the Federal Aviation Administration had given the hospital a waiver so the plane could pick up a patient. But as these pictures show, that changed, and the pilot was told to cancel the flight.
The FAA grounded all hospital flights for more than an hour, then told hospital officials at St. Vincent and Deaconess hospitals they would consider flights on a case-by-case basis. Now, this afternoon, the FAA did okay the St. Vincent flight, and it did take off again. Deaconess Hospital did not need to respond to any emergencies by air today. News of the apparent terrorist attacks is creating a mix of emotions from tears to anger here under the big sky.
Many Billings residents were just waking up this morning when they saw the first images and heard what happened.
6:57, if you're watching Q2's Daybreak, we just got word that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center.
One business owner who used to call Manhattan home says if you've never seen the World Trade Center in person, you have no idea of the enormity and tragedy of what has happened. There's also fear in Billings today, fear that one of the victims could be a friend or loved one, and fear that the attack may not be over just yet.
To take that many lives, I mean, is what can you do to someone like that? That's just a terrible act of violence that I just can't even comprehend, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who can't.
It is just so sad. I mean, to know these people. I mean, and the people on the plane. You know, could you imagine looking at your window? I mean, that's just. Right now, I'm sick. No, I'm not mad. I'm just sick.
When I was sitting at my desk, I thought to myself, my God, this is what people must have felt like when Pearl Harbor was bombed. And it just, it was just gut-wrenching.
Many people we talked to say they had trouble working today. The former Manhattan resident says his heart has not stopped pounding since he started watching the news this morning.
4 Billings women were just blocks away from what you could call ground zero to this American tragedy.
Julie Kerber joins us now from the newsroom with more on how these horrific images are hitting very close to home. Julie?
Well, Jay and Julie, Sherry Basso takes a trip to New York City with 3 of her friends every year to shop and take in a few plays. But today, as she was packing her bags and getting ready to come home, she instead watched a catastrophe unravel right before her eyes.
And then knew right away that it had to be a terrorist attack. We had been at the Trade Center 2 days ago, and it's just a tragedy to see what's happened.
What started as a fun-filled vacation to the Big Apple is ending with these images and some emotions that Billings resident Sherry Basso finds hard to hold back.
So sorry for the people that have lost their lives. That's the very worst part. And we just want to go home. We want to be back home, but I don't know how long it'll be before we can get out of the city.
More than anything, we were just glad that Mom was all right.
Close to 2,000 miles away, Sherry's daughter woke up to a phone call. The sound of her mother's voice saying she was okay.
I hadn't even watched TV yet.
Really?
Yeah.
What was your first reaction when you...
Well, she said that a plane had crashed into the World Trade Center, and she said that she was just calling to let us know that she was fine and that she probably wasn't going to be able to come home today.
And bring to swift justice those responsible. 2 Billings residents say the plane crashed into the World Trade Center. 2 Billings residents say the plane crashed into the World Trade Center. 2 Billings residents say the plane crashed into the World Trade Center. 2 Billings residents say the plane crashed into the World Trade Center. 2 Billings residents say the plane crashed into the World Trade Center. 2 Billings residents say the plane crashed into the World Trade Center. 2 Billings residents say the plane crashed into the World Trade Center. 2 Billings residents say the plane crashed into the World Trade Center. 2 Billings residents say the plane crashed into the World Trade Center. 2 Billings residents say the plane crashed into the World Trade Center. 2 Billings residents say the plane crashed into the World Trade Center. 2 Billings residents say the plane crashed into the World Trade Center. 2 for these despicable attacks.
Since then, it's been hard to pry Janet away from the TV set, watching and knowing that her mom is just a few blocks away.
They don't want him to leave the hotel. And when they look out the window of the hotel, the streets are quiet. And that's eerie.
And since air travel has been suspended, Janet says her dad is thinking about driving to New York to pick up Sherry and her friends so they won't have to wait to travel by air. For Janet, helping to explain these images to her 3-year-old nephew has been nothing short of difficult.
He's afraid that she was on the plane that hit the tower and all of that. And I think he's beginning to understand that she's fine because he talked to her on the phone and everything like that. But it's still, I don't know what to say. I've never had to go through this before.
Now, Sherry was trying to get home because tomorrow marks her 38th wedding anniversary. Her daughter flew in from Kansas City and they had family plans, but her family says they are just thankful that their mom is doing okay. And her 3 friends, Sue Agnew, Carol Peeler, and Gail Young, also from Billings, are all doing just fine tonight. Jay and Julie, back to you.
All right, Q2's Julie Kerber reporting live from the newsroom. Thanks, Julie.
Thanks, Julie. Right now, thousands of families are in the Basso's shoes, unable to reach their loved ones who may be at the heart of this tragedy. The executive director of the Billings chapter of the American Red Cross says right now her office is accepting what's called family well-being inquiries. If you cannot get a hold of a family member in the New York or Washington, D.C. area, you can call the Red Cross office at 245-3512, and people there will try to help you make contact.
And as for some of the other Red Cross resources, Adela Honor says right now there are a number of trained disaster mental health volunteers here in the Billings area who are on standby to respond.
Now, dozens of Billings residents who are shocked by today's attack are lining up outside United Blood Services.
They'd heard on the news that the disaster was going to bring a nationwide blood shortage and, of course, wanted to help out. Officials with United Blood Services say the chairs were full here all day and they're working hard to get an overwhelming number of blood donors.
I just wanted to do something, just be a part of it. It makes me feel more like an American to be in here giving blood.
The important thing for the public to remember is going to be every bit as important for them to donate in a week or two as it is today. This will be a sustained need.
Weatherwax Ripley says United Blood Services has extended its hours and they've set up extra booths to accommodate everyone who would like to donate blood.
If you would like to help victims of today's attacks, Q2 and the Montana Television Network are setting up a statewide relief fund. You can drop off your donation at any First Interstate Bank location in Montana or Wyoming. You can also send donations to Q2 Relief Fund in care of First Interstate Bank, 401 North 31st, Billings 59101.
The news of this tragic act of terror was a shocking wake-up call for many here in the Magic City today.
The incident prompted many Billings business owners to lock down for the day. Q2's Sonu Wasu visited area businesses and brings us a story. Sonu.
Well, Jay, Julie, it may have happened thousands of miles away from here, but the aftershocks from the terror that struck on the East Coast this morning had residents living here numb with shock.
I mean, this is truly a tragedy. It's one of the biggest tragedies America's ever faced.
The flags at Rimrock Mall were flying at half-mast, the huge parking lots empty all day. 20 minutes before they opened these doors, mall managers decided to lock down for the day.
Out of respect, I think that it is appropriate to close today.
In light of the recent events on the East Coast, our offices will be closed today.
Individual business owners made their own call after just a few hours at work. And at places that were open for business,
The SEC halted all trading in U.S. markets.
not much was accomplished with all eyes riveted to TV sets.
Yeah, it's a sad day, and I think it's the world will never be like it was yesterday.
Scott says the bank was prepared for customers in a panic to draw all their money out, a response to the fears fueled by this act of terror. They did not see that happen. All First Interstate employees saw was a quiet state of shock.
Can't happen in America. It happens in other countries.
Managers say that they will be open for business tomorrow. All the post offices in the city were open today, but any mail that had to come in or leave here by air was impossible to send out because of the flight cancellations. Jay, Julie, back to you.
Alrighty, Q2 Sonu Wasu, thank you.
Millions of children saw the graphic images of the attack today on television. Now many parents are wondering how to talk to their kids about what they saw today.
West High school psychologist Evie Lamont says it's important for parents to reassure their kids and keep control of their own emotions about the attack when they're with their children.
It's quite devastating, and their feelings of anger, of intense anxiety, of fear, of unpredictability when an event like this occurs, and a feeling of lack of control. There's no way to control events. However, I think adults and kids' lives need to reassure them that they are, for the most part, quite safe, and we'll keep them safe, and that how we manage things in front of the kids, our own anxieties, is how they'll learn to manage things.
Now, Evie Lamont says parents need to limit what their young children see and hear on TV. They also need to really listen to their kids and answer any questions they may have.
Lamont says children are essentially self-centered, and you need to reassure them that their world is safe. And one final tip, parents can encourage their kids to visit with school counselors who are trained, of course, to handle this type of situation.
Now, several Billings area schools have postponed events planned for this evening. Open houses at the following schools have been canceled for tonight: Boulder Elementary, Burlington Elementary, Central Heights Elementary, Highland Elementary, Newman Elementary, Orchard Elementary, and Rose Park Elementary. An ice cream social at Alkali Creek School has also been canceled. Also, the West PTA meeting in Laurel is canceled. School officials say they will reschedule these events.
Billings Mayor Chuck Tooley encouraged Magic City residents to persevere through this time of national crisis.
The mayor prepared this statement for broadcast this afternoon.
The attack on our nation this morning is also an attack on the principles of freedom and self-determination. We are the nation to whom the entire world looks for opportunity and for hope, and we will continue with firm resolve. Our hearts go out to those who are injured and to those thousands of people who have lost family members. Still, we must continue with our lives, our businesses, and be ready to assist others when we're called upon. The purpose of terrorism is to conduct psychological warfare and undermine our sense of safety, our commerce, and the very foundation of our society. The way we fight terrorism as a community, right here in Billings, is to keep on keeping on, to show that we will continue and that our people will prevail. I'm confident that the people of Billings will stand ready to do whatever is required of us, and I thank you.
Billings Mayor Chuck Tooley, will hear more from him tonight.
The tremors from the attacks in New York and Washington, D.C. can be felt throughout the United States today, affecting daily lives here in Montana.
Our Capitol correspondent Erica Hurt tells us that state officials are working to tighten security all across the Treasure State.
That's right, officials in our capital city have been on the move since early this morning when the news broke. They've been stepping up security at state and federal buildings and preparing military forces. While the governor says there is no direct threat to Montana, she says all of these precautions are imperative.
We must in Montana take the necessary steps to protect our citizenry. This means increased security at all state of Montana and federal buildings and facilities, and identification of all resources that are necessary and available to deal with this emergency.
The governor met with State Department and military leaders throughout the day and held briefings with the media every 2 hours. Security at the Capitol was beefed up with extra personnel, barricaded driveways, and a police presence. Montana disaster emergency officials have also stepped up surveillance and are operating on a 24-hour basis.
We plan to be open 24 hours a day for the foreseeable future so that we can provide whatever assistance is required to the citizens of the state of Montana.
Army National Guard leaders say Montana is on a threat con Delta alert, called when a terrorist danger exists, and a Montana F-16 unit is on alert status today.
We received information that our Air National Guard, which is an F-16 fighting unit, has been federally activated to support this nation in the state of Montana, which means our F-16s will go in an air defense mode.
Security at the federal building in Helena was also increased, with security units patrolling the area. Federal officials called for the evacuation of that building this morning, and employees thought it was the right call.
I think we have a pretty good sense of security in Montana because we're so isolated. I think a lot of us actually had many things on the plate and wanted to put in a good day's work, but at the same time there's such a feeling of probably national unity. I know I feel it. that there is a sense that let's not go on business as usual. It should be a time of national unity. This is an unbelievable tragedy.
In an expression of that national unity, the governor is urging all Montanans to give blood today to help those injured in the attacks. She also issued a state of emergency for Montana earlier today, and those briefings with the DES and military leaders will continue throughout the evening, and we'll be there to bring you coverage. Reporting in Helena, I'm Erica Hurt for Montana's news station. Back.
Thanks, Erica. Federal Emergency Management Director Joe Albaugh was in Big Sky when the attacks occurred for a disaster conference today with the emergency management directors from 38 states.
Montana disaster officials said FEMA personnel were setting up a temporary command post at Big Sky because Albaugh was not immediately able to fly back to Washington.
A well-planned, well-financed attack on our freedom by a faceless and gutless enemy. That's how Montana Senator Conrad Burns characterized today's terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. Burns says today's attacks are the Pearl Harbor of this century, and he says the nation is now at war.
Burns, along with Congressman Denny Rehberg and Senator Max Baucus, were all evacuated from Capitol Hill early this morning once word of the attack spread. We did speak via phone today with Senator Baucus from his Washington, D.C. home, who said that today's events have ushered in a new era in American history.
It's clearly a new era for the United States. It's a new reality. It's a whole new level of international terrorism relations, and how we're going to, as Americans, have to step up and demonstrate our resolve and coming and uniting, pulling together the President, Congress, all American people to hunt down and hold these people totally accountable, and not allow ourselves to be cowed by this terrorism. Terrorists want the United States to be cowed, to prevent public, for example, from visiting national monuments and so forth, and we can't let that happen either. We can't. We have to continue our civil liberties in the United States. But clearly, it's a new era for the United States.
That was Montana Senator Max Baucus speaking with us from his home in Washington today.
Elsewhere tonight, the gates of Malmstrom Air Base have been closed. In fact, they've been closed since shortly after 8 a.m. this morning.
Colonel Thomas Deppy told us the base went into what officials call Force Protection Delta at about 8:30 this morning, which is about the time the jetliner crashed into the Pentagon in Washington, D.C.
He explains tonight what Delta means.
Delta is the most severe force protection condition we go to. We basically lock everything down. We restrict movement on base to only mission essential and critical movement. We only allow people on base that either live or work here. If you're delivering goods or if you're a contracted employee coming to work on base, you get turned away.
Colonel Deppy says Malmstrom has received no threats of terrorism. He says going into Delta is an appropriate security precaution given the events that have unfolded across the nation.
Today's attacks have also forced the United States Border Patrol and Customs officials to heighten security on the nation's borders.
All borders between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico are open, but at the highest level of security. Today, motorists, mostly truckers, had to wait several hours in long lines to cross the border from Montana into Canada. They say Border Patrol officers are being a lot more cautious and asking many questions. Custom officials say there are currently no plans to close the U.S. borders. A former Pentagon tour guide and member of the U.S. Air Force says he believes the attack on the Pentagon was largely symbolic. Billings resident Mary Kirby took the public on tours through the Pentagon in the early 80s. Kirby also worked in nuclear security and spent 8 years in satellite communications. He says the airspace above the Pentagon is restricted, but says if an aircraft does penetrate that restricted airspace, there is no immediate defense or action in place to defend the building from this type of attack.
The Pentagon certainly is an enormous symbol, not only of American defense and offense capability, but just the fact that America is at the top of the pile across the world. You know, the Pentagon is one of those nerve centers where we direct a lot of operations around the world from.
Does it make you angry at all?
Well, sure it makes me angry. I mean, those are You know, those are people that died.
My apologies to Mr. Kirby, not Mary Kirby, it is Mark Kirby. The latest word is that the plane crash at the Pentagon has wounded or killed about 100 people. Those are just estimates at this point.
Today's devastating event shook the nation's sense of community. Critics are saying this is the Pearl Harbor of terrorism.
And as Q2's Whitney Ewing found out today, one Pearl Harbor survivor agrees.
September 11th is one more day Ed Chapowski will never forget.
Kind of flashback. I was sitting on my bunk at Pearl Harbor about 60 years ago, and I seen what looked to me like the top of the hangar of Hickam Field going up in the air. About the time the airplane turned away and went off to the side, I realized it was the Japanese. My heart sank then. It did again today.
Almost 60 years have passed since Chapowski experienced firsthand the reality of terrorism on American soil.
Anything blows up like that. The ones that were lucky were the ones that died instantly. All the rest of them are going to suffer.
Chapowski says this will have a lasting effect on the United States and its sense of security. Professors at MSU Billings Conference today agree and say these types of actions send a strong message of hate and disregard for human life.
Policy which many people do not like, and that therefore causes the hatred against the United States.
And all hate really does is poisons the one that is doing the hating. I don't know what the answers will be.
While the nation sits and waits for more details, Chapowski says we need to remember what everyone in America stands and dies for: freedom. In Billings, Whitney Ewing reporting from Montana's news station.
Religious groups across the Magic City have been pulling together today to pray for victims and their families.
They're hosting more than a half-dozen prayer vigils in the wake of today's tragedy. Q2's Anna Rao is standing by live at St. Patrick's Co-Cathedral tonight with more on this. Anna.
Well, Jay, Julie, there have been several prayer vigils across the city today of all religions and all denominations. One of those prayer vigils just wrapped up here at St. Patrick's Co-Cathedral. Here with me now is Father John Houlihan with St. Patrick's Co-Cathedral. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Anna.
Why is prayer such an important and kind of a thing to do at this time?
People have always reached out beyond themselves in times of hopelessness and helplessness, and when they felt confused and uncertain, they've reached out to God for purpose and meaning and for hope in their lives. The second thing is, I would say, is that prayer and vigils and keeping memory offers people a chance to express their support and their care and their love for those who have died and those who are suffering and their families, and to pray that God would bless these people with hope and courage and light in facing the days and the years ahead.
I noticed that there's been a really great turnout at all the prayer vigils today. Is this something that gives people strength at a time like this?
Yes, absolutely. When we come to prayer, we receive the Spirit of God upon us to bless us with comfort and consolation and meaning and strength in dealing with the unknown.
Father John Houlihan, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I appreciate it.
Thank you,
now,
Anna.
several more of those prayer vigils are scheduled for later on tonight and later on in the week. Here are just a few of those. If you'll observe, First Assembly Life Center is scheduling a prayer vigil every night this week starting at 7 o'clock, and St. Patrick's Co-Cathedral will continue to have their masses at regular times with prayers in those for the families and their victims. All Billings United Methodist churches will also hold a joint service tomorrow night at 7 o'clock p.m. And what I'm hearing is that many of these vigils are focusing on peace in our country and in our world, and focusing on hope in the face of such terror and disaster. Julie J.
Q2's Anna Rao reporting live tonight. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you, Anna. Now, tonight at 6:30 p.m. Montana time, President Bush will address the nation from Washington, D.C. on today's events.
We, of course, will be carrying the president's address live here in about 30 minutes. And if there was any question about the magnitude of today's events, look at this. This is an extra edition of the Billings Gazette put out around 4:30 today. It's actually the second extra edition. Another one was put out around 2:30 today. We spoke with the Gazette editor Steve Przinski. He says this is the first extra edition that the Billings paper has put out in more than 30 years, they think perhaps since the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Here was the earlier one, and you can see the headlines. Right. Oh my God, further evidence of the unprecedented events of this tragic day.
Clearly an extraordinary day across our country and across our region. Yeah. We want to make sure you stay tuned to Q2 as we continue to update you on this tragedy. Be sure to join us here at 10 as well for the very latest. And on this difficult day for our country, Montana veterans are urging you to demonstrate your pride.
Even more using the non.
America vows to retaliate after a terrorist attack destroys American buildings and lives.
President Bush says the attacks today at the World Trade Center and the Pentagon cannot dent the steel of American resolve. Good evening. Thanks for joining us for this special edition of the Q2 10 o'clock news. Once the tallest buildings in New York City, the World Trade Center towers have been reduced to a pile of rubble.
It all started this morning just before 9 o'clock Eastern Time. Now thousands are hurt or dead and countless others are missing.
It's the worst terrorist attack ever to take place on U.S. soil. We've talked to a number of people from our region today who have been personally touched by the tragedy. We'll bring you those stories in just a moment. We begin our coverage tonight with two reports, beginning with Drew Levinson, who joins us live now from New York City.
We are here in Jersey City, New Jersey, across the Hudson River from lower Manhattan. Behind me, smoke continues to rise from the rubble of what used to be the World Trade Center. Tonight, officials are telling us that there are still survivors in that rubble. They're contacting them via a cell phone. This is part of the worst act of terrorism ever on U.S. soil. The horror unimaginable.
We saw a plane coming very low, and everyone said, wow, that plane is very, very low.
The pictures unbelievable.
Oh, my God!
And in just a matter of minutes, a giant symbol of American financial power came crumbling down. Two hijacked airliners loaded with scores of passengers slammed into New York's World Trade Center. The twin 110-story towers set ablaze. The well-coordinated terrorist attack began before 9 o'clock in the morning. The first plane striking the northern tower. Just 15 minutes later, another giant aircraft loaded with fuel slammed into the southern building.
Another one, another plane just hit. Right, oh my God, another plane has just hit.
With New York in shock, the towers then came tumbling down. First, Tower 1.
Top floors collapsed down.
Then, Tower 2. But the devastation didn't end there. Shortly after 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Building 7, home to many Wall Street firms, crashed to the ground. Officials say it will take days to count the number of dead and injured, but with 50,000 workers in the Trade Center alone, New York's mayor says the numbers may be too much to bear. And a third plane bound for San Francisco from Newark went down about 80 miles outside of Pittsburgh. 45 people were killed in that crash. And a fourth plane crashed into the Pentagon in Washington. My colleague, Aline Sagani, is covering that part of the story. Aline?
Drew, that was Flight 77, American Airlines, leaving Washington Dulles, headed to Los Angeles. It slammed into the Pentagon at 9:38 this morning. Now, at this hour, the Pentagon remains on fire. There are dozens of emergency workers on the site, but they still can't reach ground zero. 40 minutes after the World Trade Center attacks, the Pentagon met a similar fate. A hijacked American Airlines plane bound for Los Angeles slammed into the Pentagon, causing one wing of the building to collapse. President Bush says he'll use the full resources of the United States to track down those responsible.
We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them.
It happened mid-morning. Witnesses say it looked like a huge orange fireball hit the building.
I couldn't believe that I saw an American Airlines jet just gliding right in to the side of the Pentagon. A huge black billow of smoke came up.
Washington is now under the highest level of security, but officials say even that isn't enough to make any guarantees.
A terrorist can attack at any time, at any place, using any technique. It is physically impossible to defend at every time, in every place, against every technique.
Partly for that reason, much of Washington was shut down, from federal buildings to offices to schools.
God bless America.
The Capitol building was also closed, but members of Congress, hundreds strong, returned to Capitol Hill tonight to say life in Washington will go on.
These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed.
Coming out live now, the Pentagon has now been burning for some 15 hours. Dozens of emergency search and rescue teams from all over the country are on the site, but they say the building itself is not safe enough to enter. They plan on going in first thing in the morning. In the meantime, emergency people here on the scene tell us their fear is that the death toll could reach as high as 800. At the Pentagon, Aline Sergani, now back to you.
Thanks, Aline Sergani, for CBS News.
Again tonight, the hunt for survivors near the World Trade Center in New York continues. Reports are that some survivors are using cell phones to call for help. And the death toll from the hijacked planes, 4 of those planes, stands tonight at 266 people.
The Federal Aviation Administration has locked down all air travel until at least noon Eastern Time tomorrow.
Q2's Joe Gale spent the day at the Billings Logan International Airport and has this report tonight on the impact there.
The Federal Aviation Administration has ordered airports nationwide halt all outbound flights, commercial and private, including those scheduled out of Billings Logan International Airport.
Everything that's in the air on the ground, all the planes that were scheduled to depart have not.
Until further notice, packages and passengers with every Billings carrier are standing by, including those people who were briefly seated on United's outbound flight scheduled for Denver this morning.
Just as we were loading, they made the announcement that we had to unload and come get our luggage, and they just announced that there was some incidents at the World Trade Center.
With events still unfolding around the country, including reports of commercial airline hijackings, many passengers here say they're glad to be grounded.
I'm scared to go on. I really am. I think I'm going to cancel my flight to D.C. even though I'm supposed to be there for a 3-day conference.
It's a concern, you know, obviously any kind of activity on a national level that shuts down every airport in the United States is a concern.
Logan officials say they've not received any suspicious air traffic in the Billings region, and until further notice will remain on full alert, working with federal officials ensuring the airport's staff, administration, and passenger safety.
We got to take every threat seriously, and we'll certainly work with the federal agencies of all types to do what we need to do in this circumstance.
Meanwhile, all stranded air passengers continue to watch and wait.
And I keep thinking about the people that are on the plane and the people in the building, because this was at such a peak time. It's just too horrendous. I can't even imagine.
In Billings, Joe Gale reporting from Montana's news station.
Today's airport security measures also grounded at least one St. Vincent healthcare flight for a time. This morning, the pilot of the fixed-wing plane had to return to the airport shortly after takeoff. The Federal Aviation Administration had given the hospital a waiver so the plane could pick up a patient. But as these pictures show, that changed and the pilot was told to cancel the flight. The FAA grounded all hospital flights for more than an hour and then told hospital officials at St. Vincent and Deaconess hospitals that they would consider flights on a case-by-case basis. This afternoon, that St. Vincent flight did make its journey after the FAA gave the okay.
In the wake of today's attacks, fear about a shortage of gasoline now causing prices at the pump to skyrocket here in Billings.
Many gas stations have already posted higher prices. Q2's Sonu Wasu is live at the Holiday gas station downtown. Sonu, has it been pretty busy there tonight?
Well, Julie, it has been and it still is. Employees here tell us they expect to run out of gas by midnight. It's been an extremely busy day in gas stations throughout the county. In fact, one gas station in the Billings Heights actually ran out of gas at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Now, earlier this evening, this was the scene at gas stations throughout town. What's causing this surge in prices is a fear that this morning's terrorist attacks could disrupt the supply of gasoline. At the Blue Basket and Flying J stations in Lockwood, prices have already been posted at more than $2 a gallon.
Everybody was saying, go get gas now, because speculation was anywhere from $3 to $5 a gallon tomorrow.
With the tension in the Middle East, of course, now, I can see a shortage in fuels, and the increase in price doesn't surprise me whatsoever.
We're leaving in a few days, and I'm not anticipating those gas prices because we're moving to Las Vegas. So.
Are you driving?
We're driving. we may be pushing.
The Associated Press is reporting that the nation's largest oil company has already promised to freeze their prices and are promising to keep distribution steady in an effort to dismiss fears of a fuel shortage. But it looks like the damage has already been done because the widespread panic has already fueled a fear of a gasoline shortage throughout the nation, and that is what is causing this surge at prices at the pumps. Jay, Julie.
So do retailers have any idea how high those prices could go?
Well, Julie, most of the gas station managers I spoke with quoted the prices to be within $2 to $3 initially, but that's still a lot better than the rest of the country because in cities like Oklahoma and Michigan and Mississippi, prices are already posted at $5, and down in Georgia, we hear that prices are at $8 a gallon, believe it or not. Back to you.
All right, Q2's Sonu Wasu, thanks for that report. We've had a ton of phone calls here at the station tonight asking what's going on with the price of gas.
Lots of long lines. Okay, thanks, Sonu. Many Billings business owners decided to close their doors today. Flags were flying at half-staff at the Rimrock Mall, and the huge parking lots there were empty all day long. 20 minutes before they opened these doors, mall managers decided to lock down for the day. Individual business owners made their own call after just a few hours at work.
Out of respect, I think that it is appropriate to close today.
In light of the recent events on the East Coast, our offices will be closed today.
Yeah, it's a sad, sad day, and I think it's the world will never be like it was yesterday.
Rimrock Mall managers say they will be open for business tomorrow. All local post offices were open today, but any mail that had to come in or leave here by air could not because of the flight cancellations.
News of the apparent terrorist attacks is creating a mix of emotions from tears to anger right here under the big sky.
Many Billings residents were just waking up this morning when they saw the first images and heard what happened.
6:57, you're watching Q2's Daybreak. We just got word that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center.
One business owner who used to call Manhattan home says if you've never seen the World Trade Center in person, you have no idea of the enormity and tragedy of what has happened. There's also fear in Billings tonight, fear that one of the victims could be a friend or loved one, and fear that the attack may not be over.
As of a half hour ago, and utilizing all of
So scary. Of course, we don't know why, if it's over, if it's going to continue, if it'll happen again. Those are all the questions that I have personally.
Initially, I was just gut-wrenching outraged, but now I'm outraged, but I am more thinking about the family and the people that died and got injured and killed.
Many people we talked to today said they had trouble working. The former Manhattan resident says his heart has not stopped pounding since he started watching the news this morning.
As the sirens blared and images flashed worldwide detailing today's horrific attacks, one senior high school teacher clung to her phone, waiting to hear her son's voice.
As Julie Kerber reports, Judy Barnes' son works in the heart of the World Trade Center complex.
The streets of New York are being compared to a war zone. It's a war zone that Judy Barnes' son, Brooks, is right in the middle of. He's a staff writer for the Wall Street Journal. The 26-year-old Billings native works in the World Trade Center complex, and he was at work when a commercial jetliner ended up shattering the security of the nation.
They heard a rattling of windows, and they weren't sure what it was, and immediately they said to evacuate the building. So they went down the stairway onto the street. And when they got onto the street, they were looking up because they didn't, have a clue what it was. They could see smoke and debris, a little bit of debris coming down. But then they looked over and actually could hear a plane, like a low-flying plane, and immediately saw the plane hit the other towers. And he said at that point, complete pandemonium broke out, and thousands of people were running and screaming and crying and trying to get out of the way. They just were on the street trying to decide where to go and started running the other way. And had they run the initial direction they had started to go, they turned around and the building, the South Tower, actually crashed down. And they would have been right there.
You called it a brush with death.
Absolutely. You just don't realize how quickly things can impact you. And like he said, if he had gone the other direction, the building went down. But, you know, he said that there were just so many people, thousands of people. People couldn't see. They were, you know, running into buildings and running into poles. And he said it was just very frightening.
Could you hear the panic in his voice?
His voice was, he was clearly shaken. You know, the first time I talked to him, he was crying and very grateful to be talking to me. He has no clue about work, about his workers and friends, but he's just very, very grateful to be alive. Well, we never thought we'd see this, ever, any of us. You know, we just have been praying that it wouldn't happen, but fearful that it would.
Quite the story. We do want to thank Judy Barnes for sharing that emotional day with us tonight.
4 Billings women were just blocks away from the World Trade Center when the attack happened. Sherry Basso takes this trip to New York every year to in her words, shop and see a few shows. She spoke with Q2's Julie Kerber on our noon show today about watching the attack unfold before her eyes.
We were getting ready to leave, and we're watching TV, and I called to one of the other gals and said, "Come here, the World Trade Center's been hit." And then just a few seconds or a few minutes later, then we saw the other hit, and then knew right away that it had to be a terrorist attack. We had been at the Trade Center 2 days ago, and it's just a tragedy to see what's happened. So we've been watching it.
What was your reaction? I mean, what are your thoughts and your emotions knowing that you're just blocks away from the worst terrorist attack on American soil?
Oh, we're not frightened at all. You're just so sorry for the people that have lost their lives. That's the very worst part. And we just want to go home. We want to be back home, but I don't know how long it'll be before we can get out of the city. So it's just a terrible tragedy. And our families are worried, so.
I'm sure they are. Does it feel almost surreal?
Well, you can't believe it. It's just something that should not have occurred, and I don't know, it's just awful. It's just terrible.
Sherry was trying to get home today because tomorrow marks her 38th wedding anniversary. Her daughter flew in from Kansas City for the occasion, and they had family plans. Now Sherry's daughters say they're just extremely thankful that their mom is okay. And while their nerves are shaken, Sherry's friends Sue Agnew, Carol Peeler, and Gail Young, also from Billings, are all doing fine.
If you're having trouble reaching loved ones in New York City or Washington, D.C., the American Red Cross may be able to help. The executive director of the Billings chapter of the American Red Cross says right now her office is accepting family well-being inquiries. So if you cannot reach a family member in the New York or Washington, D.C. area, you can call the Red Cross office, the number there on your screen, 245-3512. People there will try to help you make contact. As for some of the other Red Cross resources, Adela Honor says right now there are a number of trained disaster mental health volunteers here in the Billings area who are on standby to respond.
Americans have been riding an emotional roller coaster all day long, experiencing everything from a sense of loss to anger. Many found it difficult to focus on work today as the violent images of the attacks replayed over and over in their minds. The director of behavioral health for St. Vincent Healthcare says that's to be expected. He says to get through this emotional time, it's important to speak up rather than bottle up your feelings.
Everybody will have a little bit different way of coping with this, but one of the best ways is to talk about it. Physical exercise, cry if you feel like crying, be angry if you feel like being angry. All of that is very normal.
Mike Nichols says we're undergoing a kind of post-traumatic stress, and there's a good chance we may experience a wide range of feelings for the next 3 to 4 days or even the next 3 to 4 weeks. But he says if you find that these emotions are seriously affecting you, you should seek professional help. More than 100 Billings residents stepped forward today to do what they could to help the victims of today's attack. They showed up at United Blood Services to donate blood after hearing that the disaster was going to create a nationwide blood shortage. UBS officials say their chairs were full all day, and they're working hard to try to get an overwhelming number of blood donors. They say they'll need more donors in the days and weeks ahead.
I just wanted to do something.
just be a part of it. It makes me feel more like an American to be in here giving blood.
The important thing for the public to remember is going to be every bit as important for them to donate in a week or two as it is today. This will be a sustained need.
WeatherWax Ripley says United Blood Services has extended its hours and set up extra booths to accommodate everyone who wants to donate blood. She says 108 people donated today, while usually a good day means about 25 donations at UBS.
If you'd like to help victims of today's attacks, Q2 of the Montana Television Network have set up a statewide relief fund. You can drop off your donation at any First Interstate Bank location in Montana or in Wyoming. You can also send donations to Q2 Relief Fund. That's in care of the First Interstate Bank, 401 North 31st Street. Here in Billings, the zip code is 59101.
In the face of such tragedy and confusion, people sometimes feel they have nowhere to turn.
But tonight, several Billings churches tried to give those people a ray of hope through community and prayer. Q2's Beth Reed reports.
No matter the denomination or the kind of worship, in several churches across Billings, prayer was a common means of trying to find peace in the face of tragedy.
I think people have a sense that there is a power beyond ourselves, that we aren't ultimately just victims of the violence at hand, that somehow there is hope.
Reverend Shuck says turning to faith also helps keep violence and anger from sprouting hatred and stereotypes about a faceless terrorist.
And the most difficult yet the most necessary prayer of all, for our enemies, whomever they may be, Lord, in your mercy.
Across town at Faith Evangelical Church, worshipers there invited any denomination to seek guidance with them through song and prayer.
An evening like this, when there's unity between all of those, it somehow throws in a common denominator, which we all really have, and just recognizing that adds a sense of unity, and in that unity it's awesome to see.
To be able to connect with God in times like this of sadness and sorrow and loss is very, very crucial.
Though the prayer services offered sympathy and hope for the hundreds of victims thousands of miles away, church communities hope turning to God and each other will also help bring understanding to a universal question being asked right here.
That question has been asked by the ancients throughout of why is this happening. I guess for me personally, the major question is who. And I think, somehow we put our trust in God.
Come to Jesus, come to church, find a connection where you can find support and encouragement.
In Billings, Beth Reed reporting for Montana's news station.
All right, thanks, Beth. Today's terrorist attacks have put the U.S. military on full alert. In fact, this evening, just before 6 p.m., Montana troops with the U.S. National Guard were told to occupy the U.S. Armed Forces Reserve Center here in Billings. They're going to do that around the clock now. Master Sergeant Warren Osick tells Q2 guardsmen will be on 24-hour alert, working 8 rotating 8-hour shifts until they're told to stand down. Osick says this heightened mode of operation allows guardsmen nationwide to respond at a moment's notice wherever they're needed. And in Great Falls, Malmstrom Air Force Base there has increased its security. It's now on what's called Delta Alert, which is the highest form of alert. It's basically a preparation for war. A base spokesman, Lieutenant Colonel Bob Haley, says this was done in light of possible terrorist activities against any U.S. personnel or facilities.
The tremors from the attacks in New York and Washington, D.C. could be felt throughout the country today, affecting daily lives here in Montana.
Our Capitol correspondent Erica Hurt brings us the latest tonight from Helena, where state officials have been working to tighten security across the state.
That's right. Just a little while ago, I got back from the 4th briefing today with the governor, DES, and military leaders. They say the situation here in Montana has not changed very much. Security is still up here at the Capitol, at state and federal buildings throughout the state. The military is still on ThreatCon Delta Alert, which means they're ready to go at any moment. The governor says all of these security precautions are still needed, even at this hour.
We must in Montana take the necessary steps to protect our citizenry. This means increased security at all state of Montana and federal buildings and facilities, and identification of all resources that are necessary and available to deal with this emergency.
The governor met with State Department and military leaders throughout the day and held briefings with the media every 2 hours. Security at the Capitol was beefed up with extra personnel, barricaded driveways, and a police presence. Montana disaster emergency officials have also stepped up surveillance and are operating on a 24-hour basis.
We plan to be open 24 hours a day for the foreseeable future so that we can provide whatever assistance is required to the citizens of the state of Montana.
Army National Guard leaders say Montana is on a threat con Delta alert, called when a terrorist danger exists, and a Montana F-16 unit is on alert status today.
We received information that our Air National Guard, which is an F-16 fighting unit, has been federally activated to support this nation in the state of Montana, which means our F-16s will go in an air defense mode.
Security at the federal building in Helena was also increased, with security units patrolling the area. Federal officials called for the evacuation of that building this morning, and employees thought it was the right call.
I think we have a pretty good sense of security in Montana because we're so isolated. I think a lot of us actually had many things on the plate and wanted to put in a good day's work, but at the same time there's such a feeling of probably national unity. I know I feel it. That there is a sense that let's not go on business as usual. It should be a time of national unity. This is an unbelievable tragedy.
Today, the governor also extended her appreciation to all of the department heads and state employees that have been working throughout the day to implement all of these different programs. The briefings will continue tomorrow, with the first one at 8:30 in the morning. We'll continue to follow those and keep you posted on the situation here in the Treasure State. Reporting at the Capitol, I'm Erica Hurt for Montana's news station. Back to you.
Thank you, Erica. Now, here in Billings, 2 federal buildings were closed today. Workers at the Jamison Courthouse and the James F. Batten Courthouse were told to go home for the day.
Billings Mayor Chuck Tooley was among those expressing his shock and dismay at the events unfolding today. Tooley told us that he feels the most important thing Billings residents can do is to stay the course and not panic.
This is a monstrous attack on our society and on the very principles of freedom and self-determination. And that's why it's so important that we continue to move ahead with our lives to defy those who would try to interrupt them.
One thing many Americans are wondering tonight is how this kind of event could have happened.
Today, the news station's Tom Kotz spoke with a man who is an expert on terrorism.
Professor Lewis Hayes teaches a popular class at the University of Montana. The name of the course? Theories of Civil Violence.
What's surprising about international terrorism is how infrequent it has been. In my course on the subject, it's always been a central theme that terrorism is really quite easy. You don't need sophisticated resources to be effective at it. So what's surprising is not that events like this occur, but that more events like this don't occur.
Hayes has lived in both Pakistan and Afghanistan and has spent the last 33 years studying acts of terror. He believes the best weapons for fighting terrorism are not high-tech military gadgets, but rather intelligence and information. 2 things the U.S. didn't have enough of today.
Now, I'm not suggesting they should be able to forecast these events, but I am suggesting that the intelligence should be able to say that the probability of something like this happening increases. And evidently, nobody had the slightest notion that somebody was going to pull off something like this.
Hayes added that while the possibility for terrorism is higher than most people would expect, the probability for a major attack like today's is still very low. In Missoula, Tom Kotz for Montana's news station.
All right, thanks. Tom Kotz reporting again from Missoula.
A former Pentagon tour guide and member of the U.S. Air Force says he believes the attack on the Pentagon was largely symbolic. Billings resident Mark Kirby took the public on tours through the Pentagon in the early 80s. Kirby also worked in nuclear security and spent 8 years in satellite communications. He says the airspace above the Pentagon is restricted, but he says if an aircraft does penetrate that restricted airspace, there is no immediate defense or action in place to defend the Pentagon from this type of attack.
The Pentagon certainly is an enormous symbol, not only of American defense and offense capability, but just the fact that America
is at the top of the pile across the world. You know, the Pentagon is one of those nerve centers where we direct a lot of operations around the world from.
Does it make you angry at all?
Well, sure it makes me angry. I mean, those are people that died.
The latest word is the plane crash at the Pentagon has wounded or killed about 100 people.
Today's devastating events shook the nation's sense of community. Some are saying this is the Pearl Harbor of terrorism.
And as Q2's Whitney Ewing found out today, one Pearl Harbor survivor agrees.
The other side.
September 11th is one more day Ed Chapowski will never forget.
Kind of flashback. I was sitting on my bunk at Pearl Harbor about 60 years ago, and I seen what looked to me like the top of the hangar of Hickam Field going up in the air. About the time the airplane turned away and went off to the side, I realized it was the Japanese. My heart sank then. It did again today.
Almost 60 years have passed since Chapowski experienced firsthand the reality of terrorism on American soil.
Anything blows up like that. The ones that were lucky were the ones that died instantly. All the rest of them are going to suffer.
Chapowski says this will have a lasting effect on the United States and its sense of security. Professors at MSU Billings Conference today agree and say these types of actions send a strong message of hate and disregard for human life.
Policy which many people do not like, and that therefore causes the hatred against the United States.
And all hate really does is poisons the one that is doing the hating. I don't know what the answers will be.
While the nation sits and waits for more details, Chapowski says we need to remember what everyone in America stands and dies for: freedom. In Billings, Whitney Ewing reporting from Montana's news station.
And one side note to this story, it turns out that Chapowski's daughter is a pilot for American Airlines. She regularly pilots both Flight 11 and 77, the two that crashed into the Twin Towers. Today just happened to be her day off.
Again, unbelievable. The whole day has been unbelievable. Bob McGuire has not had the day off. He's been offering us a background support today.
Standing by.
Spectacular sunset tonight, Bob. What's that bode for the morning?
It looks like we could see some cloudy skies starting to roll in. Here's what's happening right now. Let's just go right to the graphics. A real quick weather forecast for you. 58 degrees at the airport, 65 downtown. We have clear skies now, a north wind at about 7. And as the night goes on, we're going to see partly cloudy skies. We'll probably cool down to about 47 degrees. Then for tomorrow, it should be turning cloudy. A new cold front moving through, 69 for the high. And then the next 5 days after that, we're expecting to see things remain a little bit on the cool side. There will be a chance for some rain showers Thursday through Sunday, maybe getting back up to about 70 by Sunday afternoon.
Okay, thanks very much, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Getting back to our coverage, the country watched in horror today as terrorists attacked our families, our friends, our landmarks, and our security.
Garrick Utley has a last look tonight at the day, another day that will live in infamy for all Americans.
It was such a beautiful morning. The air was clear over Manhattan, the sky a rich blue. The two Twin Towers stood tall, anchored in bedrock of granite, so secure, so unshakable. And then, we have seen smoke and destruction before, but we've never seen madness like this, or catastrophe like this. It was a morning when words could only begin to express the horror.
It was like a blizzard, but a blizzard that wasn't cold, a blizzard that had no wind. It was just hot.
There was an enormous fireball. There was fire, debris falling to the ground, and then just a whole kind of mushroom of smoke that sort of just billowed up.
We knew that some of what happened this morning could happen, that there could be another attack on the World Trade Center as there was 8 years ago, that terrorists might attack the Pentagon and hijack commercial flights. But how could we imagine that all this could happen? That much of the government would be shut down, the capital of the United States evacuated, and the White House, that the president of the most powerful nation in the world would take evasive action for his own security. Across this nation, from airports closed down to home to workplace, we watched and tried to comprehend what we were seeing. It took time after the shock of the terror to digest the dimension of the human tragedy. We tried to imagine what those caught in the soaring towers, in the doomed planes in the Pentagon went through before the end. We can only wonder what happens next. The president vows action.
The United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts.
Retaliation, even revenge, may feel sweet one day, but right now there are only the remnants of terror, the pain of the tragedy, and the tears. Garrett Utley, CNN, New York.
Montana veterans are taking today's attack on the Twin Towers and the Pentagon especially hard. Tonight, they're urging you to demonstrate your patriotism and support for America by displaying an American flag in your yard.
And as we leave you tonight, a look at how local vets are using this symbol to show that they won't let a terrorist attack destroy the American spirit.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow.